former candidate for the U.S. Senate, longtime radio talk show host, author, and conservative policy advocate.
Justices to the Supreme Court, the left has been in open panic.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Welcome to 2021. Can it possibly be any worse than 2020? Welcome back into the 10th year of Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Prospective President Joe Biden predicts a dark winter and accuses President Trump of hollowing out the federal government and not distributing COVID vaccines fast enough. Trump goes all in on his claims that the election was stolen. So as we mercifully kiss 2020 goodbye and head for what we all hope are the safer shores of 2021, has the political climate changed? How will Georgia vote on Tuesday, determining how much power the Democrats will have for the next 2 years? And how about Vaccination Nation? Will enough people take the vaccine to immunize the population anytime soon? We'll talk it all over as we're joined by LibertyNation.com's outspoken political columnist Joe Schaefer and legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We kick things off for this 10th year of Liberty Nation Radio 2021 with our signature segment, Say What, where we roll out a virtual assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. And the biggest issue on the minds of politicians and everyday citizens alike is the COVID relief bill, or more precisely, the pork-laden stimulus which accompanied it, and the shameful politics which delayed passage of even a meager $600 until these last days. And President Trump threw a monkey wrench into the works by calling for an increase from $600 to $2,000 per person at the 11th hour. And Republicans and Democratic senators went back and forth on whether to pass the bill that had already passed in the House.
I don't want to hear it that it costs too much to help working families get a check when they're struggling.
I'm delighted to support the president in this $2,000. It's really a $1,400 increment over what we've already done.
Do we turn our backs on struggling working families, or do we respond to their pain?
We're talking about sending checks, the vast majority of which will be going to people who've had no loss of income whatsoever.
My Republican colleagues seem more interested in funding defense than in funding the defenseless.
The best stimulus there is a job.
That is Senators Schumer, Perdue, Sanders, Toomey, Markey, and Blackburn. Meanwhile, the nation's lonely eyes turn to Georgia and the two Senate races there, which will finally determine just how much power Democrats will possess for the first years of the 2020s and the capacity of Republicans to stop them. Consider the leftist landscape. If Democrats win both races, Democrats would control the White House and both chambers of Congress, albeit by razor-thin margins, allowing them free rein to advance their full progressive agenda. But if Republicans can win at least one of the two Senate contests and maintain control of the Senate, together with a newly conservative Supreme Court, they could block the inevitable gross excesses of the left and at least allow conservatives to sleep at night. With the eyes of the nation and much of the world on Georgia, the man named by the Electoral College as the next president went on the offensive against the Trump administration, claiming it's been uncooperative in the transition after 4 years of destabilizing the federal government and our foreign alliances.
For some agencies, our teams received exemplary cooperation from the career staff in those agencies. From others, most notably the Department of Defense, we encountered obstruction from the political leadership of that department. And the truth is, many of the agencies that are critical to our security have incurred enormous damage. Many of them have been hollowed out in the despair of our alliances, in the general disengagement from the world.
If Trump cared what Joe Biden or even his fellow Republicans think of his carrying on the fight, he sure didn't show it as usual, laying out the case for a fraudulent election in detail over the holidays, with the most prominent charge relating to vote dumps in the middle of the night and early morning after the poll watchers had departed.
At 6:31 a.m., very early in the morning, Michigan suddenly reported 147,224 votes, 94% for Biden, 6% for Trump. At 4:42 a.m., Wisconsin reported 143,279 votes, almost all of them for Biden. A similar massive drop of ballots happened in Georgia at 1:34 a.m. Again, almost all of these votes for Biden. These gigantic and ridiculously one-sided spikes were miraculously just enough to push Joe Biden into the lead in all of the key swing states.
Just because the media dismisses the facts Trump laid out and the sworn allegations in hundreds of affidavits without investigation, and one court after another refuses to hear the cases brought by the Trump campaign, doesn't make those facts Trump just presented any less true. Facts that will continue to haunt the majority of Trump voters who believe the election was not free and fair, but also will haunt the next man who will begin his presidency with a massive cloud of doubt surrounding him. But with Trump preparing to depart, the GOP establishment has started to try and reassert its power as they begin to separate themselves from the man who won the presidency and both houses of Congress 4 years ago. Witness the quintessential Beltway pundit known for his focus groups, Frank Luntz, complaining about Trump refusing to roll over.
It's having an impact on Fox. It's having an impact on Republicans in the House and the Senate. It feels like this president's trying to do as much damage as he can, not just to Mitch McConnell, but the Republicans in the House and in the Senate. And the press is glad to go along because it'll help in that final race of 2020 in Georgia. And I'm afraid, and I believe, that those two Republicans may well lose on the 5th of January because of what the president is doing right now.
And if those Republicans win in Georgia, will Trump get the credit? Of course not. But Republicans have an array of worries with Joe Biden heading for the White House, primarily U.S. policy on China and with big tech, according to Congressman Ken Buck of Colorado.
You see where the vice presidential pick was from and the support that she had during her career. And then you see the money that flowed into the Biden campaign. And it's payback time. It's time that the Biden administration makes sure that Google, Amazon, and the others are taken care of. And they'll do it by placing personnel in key positions, as well as continuing the flow of money back and forth. And it all comes back to the fact that Google and Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Twitter are monopolies, and they enjoy monopoly status. They crush their opposition, and they are protected now by the Biden administration.
Big tech has been cozy with Democrats for years, but as we enter the new year, the biggest challenge facing the new administration and Congress remains COVID-19. Even with 3 vaccines approved and in use, over 1 million people vaccinated by the end of 2020. The infection rate and death toll from coronavirus spiked in a third wave of infection. But we now see cases falling in 35 states and rising in only 1. But the media, which protected the saintly Anthony Fauci for months, is now willing to take him on since Biden won the election. Witness this exchange, the kind you never would have witnessed during the presidential campaign, between Fauci and Dana Bash of CNN.
You acknowledged to the New York Times that you've moved the goalposts in terms of what it would take to reach so-called herd immunity in the United States. So my question is, why weren't you straight with the American people about this to begin with?
No, actually, Dana, I don't think it can be interpreted as being straight or not. We have to realize that we have to be humble and realize what we don't know. These are pure estimates, and the calculations that I made, 70, 75%. It's a range. The range is going to be somewhere between 70 and 85%.
Fauci has always been a Rorschach test since he entered the public view. He would often make statements that were interpreted completely differently by the left and right. But Fauci will likely be comfortable with Joe Biden. After all, Biden's been in D.C. for almost 50 years, Fauci for over 40. Quick break, and then we're back to consider Obama, then Trump, then Biden. What do the people really want?
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
The latest in a spate of surveys on the political attitudes of Americans is at once shocking and unsurprising at the same time. The result in a head-to-head battle between the twin defining ideologies of our times is a landslide. Capitalism beats socialism 75% to 11%, according to Rasmussen reports. Unsurprising, you say? Well, hold on a second. We supposedly just elected a president from a party more given over to socialism than ever before. What gives? Sure, Donald Trump has displayed a personality that is unpalatable to many people, but he's also been the most unfiltered capitalist we've ever placed in the Oval Office, and a highly successful one to boot. That success undoubtedly contributed to the lopsided survey result. So then, how can a nation claiming to be all in on capitalism by a 7-to-1 margin decide to remove the foremost advocate of that philosophy in favor of a lifelong liberal who's evolving more and more into the socialist his party base truly desires him to be? And even if his heart has not actually turned leftward, how will this declining president in waiting actually be able to muster significant resistance to the clarion call from the hard left to walk their way? At the same time, there's a major caveat in all legitimate analysis of the 2020 election. The roiling controversy surrounding Dominion voting systems, massive vote dumps in the middle of the night, ejected election observers, and hundreds of sworn affidavits about election fraud are enough in sum to convince the bulk of Trump voters and many analysts that the reported outcome is not legitimate. But while all of that can, not necessarily should, but can be dismissed as conspiracy theory since courts have been so hesitant to hear the charges brought by the Trump campaign, the outcome is dubious on the surface, based solely on the reversal of virtually every metric that had for decades correctly predicted presidential elections, on measurements including party registration trends, candidates' performance during primaries, quantity of individual donations, and voter enthusiasm. Trump won on every count, but supposedly lost the election against implausible, if not impossible, odds. Now, this leads to the present lamentations of those of us who scrutinize politics for a living. How are we supposed to analyze an election which may not be on the up and up? It's almost as if we have to provide alternative responses to every question. If the reported outcome is legitimate, then the reason is A. If not, then it's B. If Biden really did win, it's because people are just repulsed by Trump's personality. But if Trump actually won, then it's an affirmation of capitalism. See the problem? We're forced into what I call an OTOH analysis. On the one hand, on the other hand. On the one hand, it's downright shocking that Joe Biden could actually win the 2020 election. While the voters were kept in the dark as effectively as possible by the media wing of the Democratic Party, they were already well aware of the Democrats' plunge into full-throated socialism based on the party's recent history and progressive rantings throughout a lengthy primary campaign. Remember, Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, reproductive rights for transgenders, and all that. On the other hand, if you do accept the outcome sanctioned by the Electoral College, perhaps we shouldn't be surprised because the recent history of presidential election reveals a nation in the throes of confusion. In 2012, we elected for the second time a man who openly vowed to trigger a fundamental transformation of America, and he did just that. But in 2016, we chose a man promising to do the opposite, winning over 200 counties who'd voted twice for the fundamental transformer. And that President Trump also did just what he promised. But in 2020, a pale shadow of 2012 emerges through the glass darkly as the reported victor. Does this sound like a country lurching to and fro, back and forth uncontrollably through the early 21st century? It's true that presidents, like politics itself, run in cycles. But the nation has rarely, if ever, swayed back and forth as frequently as in the first 2 decades of this century. The head count for election 2020 has Joe Biden with 7 million more popular votes and 74 more electoral votes than Donald Trump. But even if these numbers are off, it still figures as a close election. And that brings us right back to the burning question about the millions who claim to be capitalist but vote socialist. Do Americans even know what they really want? We'll take a quick break to let you ponder that, and then we're back to discuss where Democrats and Republicans, both in the throes of deep division, will head in 2021.
Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Mark Angelides, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Scott Cosenza, and this is Liberty Nation.
Now let's take a look at the LibertyNation.com electoral leaderboard. It's still 238 for Joe Biden.
What if stories and legends can offer us the key to unraveling the hottest political issues of the day and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics?
Impeach 45!
Only where freedom of speech is honored can people who look, sound, or think differently be truly free.
If you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other is zero.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now president.
With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
LibertyNation.com.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, just because it's a new year doesn't mean the toxic political climate of 2020 has changed or will change in 2021. Following an election which seemed to leave all sides unsatisfied in one way or another, both parties are left divided. The GOP split on whether Trump should fight to the end to overturn the election and on whether the party should take up the Trump mantle or return to their more conventional ways. And Democrats fighting over just how far left they can afford to go without suffering long-term consequences. Joining us to help clear away the fog as only he can do is the outspoken political columnist from LibertyNation.com, Joe Schaefer. Joe, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tim. Good to be here.
Always good to have you. Now, it seems like Democrats should be celebrating the likely demise of the man they did everything to bring down for 4 years, but they don't seem very happy. Why is that, do you think?
I think they realize they have two things. They have an unnatural alliance between progressives and the uniparty ranks in their party. And also, they didn't win this thing the right way. I mean, instead of convincing the American people of the rightness of their cause, they resorted to underhanded methods, election fraud, if you will. That's the right term, I believe. And they basically, hammered a square peg into a round hole. So they don't have that that natural momentum that goes with deserving your victory. But I think the more crucial thing is the unnatural alliance between the progressive left and the establishment within the Democratic Party. This really was a uniparty victory in this election. And, you know, they're going to have to deal with an angry America First Donald Trump populist movement that's not going away and is going to oppose them every step of the way moving forward. And they're going to have to placate a progressive left, which this is only a marriage of convenience for them. They want something out of this. And the Uniparty, they don't really want to give them what they want. The Uniparty wants to do what they did for 30 years before Donald Trump, get into their closed-door meetings and divvy up the American taxpayers' money. So there's going to be tension on the left and right moving forward.
Now, on the other side, it seems like Republicans are deeply divided on how they believe Trump should handle his claim that the election was stolen. Some say he should fight right up through January 20th. Others say he must give in to reality. Does this reflect a split, do you think, in Republican ranks that kind of mirrors the progressive liberal divide you just described among Democrats? Or is the GOP divide even deeper?
I think it's very similar and it's deeper because this is touching on profound change in the way politics works. For whatever reason, progressives feel they can work within the system. They swallowed Joe Biden. They swallowed Hillary Clinton. That didn't work out for them, but they were willing to go along with that. The Republican populists, the America First crowd, has shown they will not go along with the old way of doing business. That changed forever when Donald Trump went down that escalator in 2015. It's not coming back. Mitch McConnell thinks it's coming back. They're eagerly anticipating winning these Georgia runoffs, having a Republican establishment Senate working with a Joe Biden administration. It's Mitch McConnell's ultimate fantasy come true if you think about it. And the deal making is going to begin. But the divide with their own base is so stark, so deep that I don't see how it's going to work for the Republican establishment. Can you really do what they're doing with no support at all within your own party's grassroots? I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, much to their chagrin, I think. Now, Joe, unbeknownst to many, Republicans did very well in state elections in 2020. They held on to the contested state houses that were up for grabs, and they won control of 3 new state houses. That'll give the Republicans a big advantage in the once-a-decade congressional redistricting that will take place this year. Together with the Democrats losing 14 seats in the House in the 2020 election, does this mean the GOP is likely to take over control of the House next year in 2022?
Traditionally, what you said makes 100% sense, and that would be the way it goes. But, this is not a traditional political field anymore, which is what the Republican establishment certainly doesn't understand. It goes back to what I just said. Can you do all these things? Yes, you're in control of the levers of power in the political game to a certain extent, but you have alienated your entire voting base. So it doesn't matter that you have all these strings in your hand if you have no genuine support. And there is going to be a revolt if they try to take this thing back to the Bush, McCain, Romney days. The Republican base is going to be even more angry, and they have a blunt weapon to wield now. China is going to be the story, I really truly believe, in 2021. And the Republican establishment, and we know the Democrats are sullied to the gills, Eric Swalwell and a lot more, Joe Biden, Jesus Hunter. The Republican establishment is in bed with China to an astonishing degree. And believe me, populists are going to use that against them. So they are not going to be able to do whatever they want. And I do think it's going to affect them when it comes to this redistricting and trying to mount a Republican majority for 2022. If you don't have your base, you're not going to have a majority.
No doubt, China front and center going forward, because as I said, during the election campaign, no country had more at stake in this election than China because of the polar opposite positions of Trump, who challenged them for the first time ever, and Joe Biden, who's the poster child for the traditional approach of appeasement and cooperation with China. But, you know, Joe, it's never too early to start thinking about the next presidential election. And Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri seems to be positioning himself as a sort of legitimate inheritor of the Trump mantle by saying he'll challenge the Electoral College result on January 6th. Do you think Hawley has what it takes? And how would you compare his prospects to those of Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, or others?
I'm so glad you asked me specifically about Hawley, because I think this is going to be a moment where we find out about this guy. Now, he can go two ways on this. He can challenge it, something that he knows he's going to lose and it really doesn't matter. And then it looks like he's just trying to curry favor with Donald Trump supporters. That's not going to work. That will be transparent. That'll be seen. It's sort of like Ted Cruz agreeing to take up the Supreme Court challenge when he kind of knew it wasn't ever going to get there. So, you know, Ted Cruz didn't really earn a lot of points for that. If Josh Hawley just makes a gesture, then that's not going to be enough. He's got to fight. He's got to get his knuckles bloody here. And if he does that, his stock is going to soar with the Donald Trump Republicans who hold control over the grassroots of this party. If you are not an America First Donald Trump Republican, you are not going to rise as a presidential candidate in 2024. And to me, that knocks down all the rest. Nikki Haley, Donald Trump supporters don't believe in Nikki Haley. They don't trust Nikki Haley. Her record is more as a conventional politician. She is not an outsider in any genuine sense of the word. Mike Pence, he has a lot of roots in Washington, D.C. I know he served Donald Trump wonderfully, but I don't think America First Republicans ever considered him the successor to Trump. You know, they was thinking 2 terms and then 2020 and then 2024, but I just don't see it. So to me, Hawley's positioned perfectly, but he has to really fight. He can't just put on a show. He's got to really do something here with this challenge.
All right, Joe, it's our first show of 2021, so I'm going to put you on the spot with 3 predictions. First of all, who will win the Georgia Senate races? Will it be the Democrats, the Republicans, or will there be a split verdict which would leave the GOP in charge of the Senate?
There's no reason to think that Democrats won't win because they already, cheated the first time. Nothing's really changed. Why wouldn't they cheat again? Stacey Abrams is already bragging about all the votes, the ballots she's got ready to go, early voting and all that. With the voter fraud that we saw in Georgia, there's no reason to believe that otherwise.
Finally, before we let you go, how long will Joe Biden last as president?
That's anybody's guess. I mean, he's really just a figurehead to begin with. So how long is he useful? He doesn't have to do anything. He didn't have to campaign to get elected. So, I mean, it's not like it's going to be a burdensome, work requirement for him. But I really do believe they wanted Kamala Harris in all along. She was their choice before the Democratic primaries, and they want to get her into the White House as soon as possible. I would say no more than 3 years. Second year, third year, they're going to push Biden out. I really do believe that.
Okay, Joe, Happy New Year, and thanks for joining us again.
Happy New Year to you.
Joe Schaefer, political columnist at LibertyNation.com. We will break away for a moment, then come back with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Well, it is 2021 finally, and time to welcome in afresh for the new year to do something we all need to do a lot more of in 2021, which is to talk liberty and do things about liberty. And joining us is our regular contributor, as in years past, constitutional lawyer and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim, and thank you.
So, Scott, a violent night has pushed Philadelphia closer to a record number of homicides in the calendar year of 2020. And of course, this highlights the spate of urban violence that we saw starting with the killing of George Floyd, and it continued unabated through the summer, not as much in the fall. But now we see the ugly results of the pandemic year.
There seems to have been, Tim, a total dial back of policing, especially in big cities, in swing states in America. And it has accrued to the death of many Americans who otherwise would be here if it didn't. And I want to make that as starkly a point as I can. The political leadership in Philadelphia that told the police not to police and allowed protesters and just the degradation of rules in society to go on are responsible for a number of these murders that wouldn't have happened. We don't exactly know how many, but the homicide rate took a nosedive after the kind of intense war on crack cocaine that happened and culminated in the 90s and has been dipping every year since. And until now, Tim, we've seen these numbers jump up massively. And Philadelphia, like you say, is just a sounding board. It could be any big city in the country, like Chicago, could be New York, San Francisco, or LA. The violence is off the charts and it's palpable, and it is a destruction of liberty, to be sure. And it is at the hands of our elected officials that this has been done.
Well, we've spent so much time concentrating, and rightly so, on the pandemic and the election that we forgot what happened in between, which was frightening, chilling to many Americans, what happened over the summer. And now we see the end result in Philadelphia and elsewhere. And then we have kind of a reversal in Florida where prison staff beat and raped women inmates, according to federal prosecutors.
Well, that's right. We often hear reports about abuses that come from inside of prisons, but seldom are they issued by the federal government or the Justice Department. And that's what we have here. A 36-page report on the Lowell Correctional Facility in Ocala in Florida, where guards knew about places where the cameras didn't reach and took inmates there to do horrible things. And it's a real, I mean, what can you say about a society that treats the people that it is locked up this way? We're not talking about mass murderers either. I mean, the people who are in these jails and prisons, they're going to come out and they're going to be your neighbors. You're going to be across from them at a traffic light one day or walking down the street next to them. And when they come out as worse than they went in terms of damaged goods, we all suffer.
Now, back to COVID, and the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, has released rules that let teachers, lawyers, and the media jump to the front of the COVID vaccine line. How is that and why?
Happy days we're here again, Tim. We get right to the front of the line. I checked 3 of those boxes, I think. I'm going tomorrow to get this thing.
Yes, there you go.
As it happens, the panel that made these selections, made up primarily of doctors and some lawyers, decided that doctors and lawyers should be at the front of the line. They added journalists. I think it's always good because they're going to be the ones writing the stories about it, right?
Certainly you're not suggesting that lawyers were not on the front lines in fighting the coronavirus, Scott, your own profession.
Any lawyer that has to go into jail to represent somebody or walk into court with some unsavory types, and by unsavory, I don't mean with their criminal justice. I mean their hygiene and so forth, and like coughing on them. Yeah, let them get it, I think. But to the people that are sitting in their offices on Zoom meetings, I think they can wait a couple weeks while the elderly and people with comorbidities get this vaccine, to the extent that they want to.
Now to another issue which always gets people hot and bothered. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, during COVID, it'll never go away, and that's the issue of ticket quotas. The old belief system that anytime you get a ticket, it's only because the police have quotas and it's their time of month or this time of year that they have to fulfill the quota. And I really wasn't going over the speed limit and the sun was in my eyes. The mitt was too small, something like that. But an actual ticket quota has sparked a lawsuit from New Jersey cops. I guess this is an actual, real, provable ticket quota, Scott.
Tim, it's like like a unicorn or a Sasquatch that was actually found. Here, this is the one time that kind of circumstance where we do find the police talking openly about the quota, which is when they decide they don't want to enforce it anymore. And bless their hearts, Tim. This is from the, I'm looking for the union. It's the Policemen's Benevolent Association number 43, which represents the Morristown Police Department in New Jersey. And I have never been ticketed, to my knowledge, Tim, by that department. I want to make that perfectly clear.
No apparent conflict of interest here.
But one of the emails says, I need to ensure that productivity is increasing or I will be in next week to begin addressing. Please develop a plan with your sergeant to ensure men are being productive in an enforcement manner. Well, productive, what does that exactly mean in an enforcement manner? You know, these rules for what stickers we have to have on our cars, our windshields, our license plates, and all these things, these are sold or pretended to be about safety or compliance with safety rules. They're not about that. They're taxes, and they're an excuse to pull people over and investigate them for other crimes and ticket them and get the revenue for the courts and the governments that gain the because there's like fine revenue and then there's court costs revenue, but everybody's got their hand out, and it's the American motorist and taxpayer and citizen and visitor, for that matter, who has to suffer through these things instead of just, you know, actually taxing the people in some method that's called a tax and is known as a tax. We play these games, and I think it's great that, to the extent, at least in Morristown, perhaps they won't be played anymore.
Thank you, Scott.
Cheers, Tim.
And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and everybody else listening. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Mark Angelides, Sarah Cowgill, Tim Donner, and Scott Cosenza, and this is Liberty Nation.
Now let's take a look at the LibertyNation.com electoral leaderboard. It's still 238 for Joe Biden.
What if stories and legends can offer us the key to unraveling the hottest political issues of the day and apply their lessons to understanding the chaos of modern politics?
Impeach 45!
Only where freedom of speech is honored can people who look, sound, or think differently be truly free.
If you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other is zero.
President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is now president.
With one click, Liberty Nation delivers tomorrow's news.
And remember, liberty.
Today.
All the time and everywhere.
LibertyNation.com.